So good evening to all of you. It is for me as president of the European Academy of Science to give the welcome to Professor Anders Hagfeldt, Vice President of Uppsala University, expert in the area of advanced materials for energy applications, namely for dye-sensitized solar cells and perovskite-based solar cells, as well as storage energy, is a fantastic and outstanding professor with more than 120,000 citations, which means that his work is absolutely well seen by all. In these times where we are looking at European level, what could be what we classify the Ships Act now for materials, which means the Materials Act that will be formulated by the end of this year, and also the support of the alliance, university alliance like SAPEA and ALEA, that are making the backup for the commissioners and trying to identify the strategy as far as advanced materials are concerned. This is really a great topic, and we hope that we can account with Professor Anders to support us in identifying routes that could be followed and will impact on our strategy for the future, where of course we are looking for sustainability and to have green energy sources for all. And it's a great pleasure. And with this, I also would like to thank Professor Shahzada Ahmad, our coordinator of these webinars, that has been done or doing a fantastic job in inviting for the seminars outstanding personalities that will impact by sure in what we are doing and what we expect to do in the future. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Shahzada.
Thank you, Professor Rodrigo Martin. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, which times you are, dear colleagues, guests, the members of the President, researchers, and young fellows. I'm delighted to welcome you to the third seminar series of European Academy of Science. It is our opportunity to engage with the leaders of science, policy, and society. This webinar is being recorded and also live on YouTube and will be available on our YouTube channel. My name is Shahzada, and I care how much you burn, not how much you earn. By this, you can imagine that I'm big zero. So I want to be a carbon neutral, and my carbon footprint to be zero, and I advocate for carbon neutral energy. For the next 1 hour, I am joined by today Professor Anders Hagfeldt. I have a great pleasure of introducing him today. He received his PhD in 1993 from Uppsala University and moved to EPFL Lausanne. Then he came back to Uppsala University and joined as a professor and rose to the rank of the professor in 2004 and also acted as the head of the department and dean of Uppsala University. It is a rare feat. That one became professor at both places where he has worked. So from 2014 to 2020, he was a professor at EPFL also. So you can imagine his human quality. And this was also endorsed by several prizes, including the Bodorkan Prize of Sula and the Prize for Mentorship and Research and Teaching from the Nature magazine. He had visiting professorship at many numerous universities in Spain, Paris, and India and China. His research is focused on perovskite solar cells, solar fuels, and dye-sensitized solar cells, which has been summarized in nearly 700 articles. He chaired the Committee for Development of Research in the Swedish Research Council from 2013 to 2019, and the co-founder of a startup called Dynamo. Since January 2021, he is the president of, he is the Vice-Chancellor of Uppsala University and chair of the Guild of Research Intensive University. I have to tell a secret that he is also a very good drummer, and he plays in a band called Fat Cotton, and believe me, it's just a professional band. So today, Europe is now becoming an aging society, and we have to double down on our approach and stand for science. So today, Professor Hagfeldt will enlighten us and share his knowledge with how Europe can seize the opportunity for investment in knowledge, society, and role of the guild. So thank you again, Professor Hagfeldt, for accepting our invitation. And with this, I think we look forward for your dialogue and conversation with us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Shahzada Ahmad, and thank you very much also Professor Rodrigo Martins, and thanks also, of course, to the European Academy of Sciences for inviting me to give this talk, which is, of course, a different talk than what I normally have done before, which was more to talk about my own research, of course. But this will be interesting, I think, and the idea I thought was to talk a little bit about the summary of what I have seen, let's say, the last semester now at the EU level. And that comes as the role of being chair of the Guild network, the Guild of Research Intensive Universities in Europe. I think for my perspective, I will not talk for 45 minutes. I think it more to summarize what I have seen and then open up for a more general discussion and perhaps also your own input on what you see, or maybe you would like me to expand on some things I mentioned, but maybe don't dive into too much, let's say. Thanks very much for introduction. I was at EPFL to 2020, and then to my own surprise, I was nominated as the president or rector or vice-chancellor, whatever title you want to use, for Uppsala University. So I found myself coming back to my alma mater, but in a very different role, of course. So the talk today is, as Professor Ahmad said, can Europe seize the opportunity through investment in knowledge societies? And from my perspective, what is the role of the Guild network in this question? I think to start with, almost needless to mention, because I think everyone here sees and agrees that Europe needs to invest more in its knowledge societies. And I think one big role for us, of course, which truly see that, is to try to influence others of stakeholders which maybe see it in a different way or have other priorities. I think the reasons for all of us are clear, but just let me state a few of them. We see from various reports that Europe's international competitiveness is at stake. We are falling behind US and also, of course, China in the tech sector. And that sector is, of course, a key driver of growth and prosperity. We see huge societal challenges. It's green transition, digital transformation, AI. Also, I think with the withdrawal of USAID, for example, we will see a lot of difficulties in global health, particularly in Africa. One report which is, of course, talked about a lot is Mario Draghi's report from last year, which calls for a massive investment in the full knowledge system, from basic research to industrial deployment. So the need is very real, and problems, challenges are here, but also the opportunity is here. And how can then Europe seize this? And as you know, also right now, there is a very vibrant and important debate in Brussels and beyond. And we are all looking forward to see the next multi-annual financial framework being published in July. And what should EU invest in, and also, of course, how. As the president of the Guild of Research Intensive Universities, I have then found myself quite much in the center of this debate. It has been a kind of a surprise for me personally, I must admit. I am an academic and researcher at heart, and I dedicated, as was mentioned in the introduction, to work on material science for solar energy materials, solar cells, and perovskite cells and solar fuel. And it's only 5 years ago that I led the research center at EPFL in Switzerland. And that was also very much together with Professor Michael Gretzel, who I saw gave a talk in the academy during the spring semester. So we have very much to share in terms of research. So in a way, I never expected to find myself being this involved in a political debate at the EU level. So during the last few months, I had, I think, around 10 or dozens of meetings and discussions. It has been with politicians in Sweden, but it's also with researchers and presidents, rectors of other leading universities in Europe. Being president of the Guild, it's also opportunities to meet EU decision makers, including the commissioners responsible both for research and for education in the European Commission. So I want to share my main impressions of this debate and where we are heading. So the European Commission drives a clear new policy agenda. It's focusing on competitiveness and security. Some central elements are that it's a more centralized strategic steering of investments in R&I. It is to gather the EU's many funding instruments in a broader or a larger umbrella, the Competitiveness Fund, as it's called. And that is an aim to generate clearer, as they say, strategic priorities. Greater scale and flexibility is a key word used to respond to unexpected events. It is also about greater use of different new kinds of funding, also beyond the EU budget. There are guarantees from the European Investment Bank, mostly towards sustainability. Loans raised by the EU on private markets that are then lent to member states. And of course, that's a big discussion of the national level investment in R&I. In terms of substance, it is to focus the EU's investment programs on deep tech and high tech. It is defense, AI, biotech, green tech. And that is to be combined with basic curiosity-driven research, such as EurASc. There is also a new education agenda, which has a strong emphasis on building skills, the skills agenda, for example, in the tech sector mainly, and STEM more broadly. So this represents a shift from previous policies in the education sphere, which have been more generally focused on international mobility. So we have also already seen this new agenda unfolding in different EU initiatives. To mention two, it's the skills agenda, which is a 5-year plan designed to help individuals and businesses in the EU to develop and use better skills. One focuses on 3 main goals there. It is to strengthen sustainable competitiveness, which is to align with the European Green Deal. It is to ensure social fairness, that is education, training, lifelong learning, and it is to build resilience and to learn from COVID-19 and for better preparedness for future crises. Another initiative is the Competitiveness Compass, and that is a strategic framework to boost the competitiveness and innovation from 2024 to 2029. There are 3 main pillars there, which is to close the innovation gap, to enhance productivity through innovation, startups, scaling up businesses and advanced technologies. The second main pillar is decarbonization and competitiveness. So that's to integrate environmental policies with industrial and economic strategies. And thirdly, reducing dependencies and increasing security. So it's economic security and reducing reliance on external sources and a more strategic autonomy. So there are some of the initiatives which we have already seen. So where we are right now is a next step, which will, of course, be critical. On July 16, if I'm correctly informed, the European Commission will propose a new long-term budget. That's the multi-annual financial framework, or MFF, for the EU, and that will include a competitiveness fund. And this long-term budget will lay the basis for all that the EU will do in the coming years. So that is a key thing, of course. And I think for us, it's a great importance here that the academic community is actively taking part in this debate, because the negotiation after July 16 will, of course, to be how should the fund be spent and so on. So I think we all have to raise our voice and make the importance of higher education and fundamental research important. There are, of course, many interest and stakeholders involved, and of course, when the negotiation takes place, it's also the member states have a very important role, of course. So we also have to engage in discussion with our own government, let's say. If we talk about risk, I see one risk is that the Commission's agenda becomes hijacked by, let's say, too narrow interest, which may be too focused on specific industries and industrial deployment. I think rather than investing in mature industries, we need to develop the next generation and the next generation potential of technology and knowledge. Another risk I see is that the agenda becomes bogged by diverging views among member states on the way forward. Of course, we have different R&I system and some stronger and some weaker, and there may be a wish to invest more to be earmarked for specific systems. If we take France and Germany, they may, on the other hand, want to develop large-scale EU industrial policy, which should match their own huge investments at national level. So there is this fragmented R&I system, which may drive in different directions. A third risk is that Europe focused, again, too narrowly on tech skills. That has been also in Sweden, I should say, a big drive for STEM and tech skills and technologies and engineers, rather than a more broader aim to educate the next generation of responsible citizens and knowledge seekers. So I think in a way that when we talk about EU competitiveness, it's not only about, it's important, of course, and focus with technologies, but competitiveness is also with how we live and citizenship and so on. So I think we absolutely don't only need technology know-how, but also what if I use a German word called Bildung, let's say a more life education, and of course bring in humanities and social sciences in what we are doing. Coming to the Guild, so what are we doing within the Guild to participate in this debate, and what, at least from the Guild, think should be the directions to take? What I have seen, I have been now president of the Guild since August. Uppsala University is a founder of the Guild, which was started, I think it will be 10 years next year, actually. I've seen that I really enjoy to be in the Guild. Let me say that. It has, as I experience, a strong voice in Brussels, with good contacts with parliamentarians, with the council, and with the commissioners. So that's so I do feel really that Guild has been a vocal and influential voice, also influencing the Commission's proposal from the Commission. More generally about the Guild, the main goal of the Guild is to strengthen the voice of the research community in Europe. We have 23 university members, which are then research-intensive universities. Within the Guild, we run about 20 working groups with experts from the member universities, various ways, sustainability, law, and different topics. We regularly submit proposals to the Commission and to the broader debate in Brussels, trying to make the voice heard and influence and get meetings and so on. We, of course, also collaborate closely with other networks in Brussels, such as the LERU network, Coimbra, for example, the Young European Research in Universities Network, EURUN, and others. And just to mention one event we had a couple of weeks ago, a large event together with LERU, and we had a long list of, I would say, prominent European policymakers in that meeting. So it's a very active network, let's say. The vision is rather simple, of course. It comes from the academic. We think Europe must invest in building a strong knowledge society, should be based on broad and robust R&I ecosystem. I do think there is a potential to build common ground between different interests based on this vision. Basic research, by definition, I think has huge spillover effects. Investment in R&I will benefit many in Europe and in different sectors and countries. And I think we need to rally really around the joint aim of generating knowledge as a European public good. And this includes, of course, defending interdisciplinarity and, as I said before, humanities as well. To solve today's challenges from, let's say, climate change to AI, it really demands interdisciplinary approaches. I don't think, although I'm half engineer myself, but I don't think engineers alone can do it. So we need historians, economists, even philosophers, and so forth, to really make a broad and interdisciplinary approach. The Guild has, over the past couple of years, published many dozens of papers where we lay out our reviews, and you can find them if you're interested on the website, the Guild Network website, and how we think one can build a European knowledge society. We always highlight the role of basic long-term research, and it should be free basic research, and of course to develop next generation technological solution, and more generally to build new knowledge, of course. And I do think we have had some impact. A couple of months ago, we launched together with LERU an open letter to the leaders of the EU institutions. It was signed by over 200 rectors of European universities and dozens of national rectors' conferences. I hope so, and even believe that the letter contributed to shaping the views of the European Commission. Just a couple of months ago, the Commission was, as you may know, set to really scrap the framework program, and we were all very worried where it will be, if it will be some kind of loose program within the competitiveness fund and so on. But then, to our surprise, a few weeks back now, von der Leyen instead said that the framework program 10 should be safeguarded and be self-standing as a standalone instrument. So we are very happy about that. I think that was very important, and I do think that there was an influence by the networks we have worked with. Where it will lead then to and how it will look like is, of course, next step to discuss. So beyond these efforts to influence EU policy, the Guild has launched a quite ambitious project to develop cooperation between universities in Europe and Africa. So it is the Guild and the ARUA network, the African Research University Association network, which have program together. We seek to lead by example and action on the ground. And each of the participating universities have pledged to invest in long-term structures to support what we call cluster of research excellence, core, and it's in different academic fields covering, I would say, a very broad topic of academic fields. And a key word here is equitable and new way of cooperation with African partners. And we do have high hopes that many of these clusters will succeed in getting funding from the EU. It's around 20 cores, 20 clusters. From Uppsala, to mention that, we are co-lead. So there is always a co-lead from the Guild and a co-lead from Aruba together. And in Uppsala, just to give you an example, we are co-lead together with Stellenbosch University on AI and digitalization. We are co-lead on food and health together with University of Cape Town. And then I don't remember really what we are co-lead with, but we also have global health and mathematics as clusters from Uppsala, just to give you a flavor of what kind of clusters there are. So these are some wins. But as I said, the debate on Europe's investments and policies is, of course, far from over. I personally believe that we are only at the beginning of a long journey. And now, after the MFF is published, and we will see how the competitiveness fund is set up, the negotiations will, of course, now start after this, in July, so to speak. Denmark will hold the presidency of the council, so that will be important to see where that happens. And the end game of the negotiations will be under the presidency of Cyprus. Then, besides the budget investments, I also wanted to mention a fundamental underlying issue of importance, and that is, of course, to protect the autonomy of universities, academic freedom. Of course, we all see with I think, scaredness, the wind blowing in the US, and what happens here, happens there. I think we need to do what we can to support our American colleagues. I was there with the Uppsala University management team middle of March. Just to summarize that week, we were there. We had meetings at the Swedish Embassy in Washington. We met with University of Maryland, with Academy in New York, part of the leadership of Harvard and Broad Institute. And at that time, now this is middle of May, so it was early days in a way, but strong confusion and strong fear, I would say, for what was going on. So I felt both that we were very, very welcome. They really wanted to have contacts with abroad, so to speak. And also we have seen how things have developed, and that is maybe something for a discussion after my introduction here. I do think we need to lead by example and reinforce the protection of academic freedom in Europe. I think that's very important. The Guild is working hard on this issue. A couple of weeks ago, the Guild organized a lecture of academic freedom. We have decided to make the lecture an annual event, so we see that as an opportunity to each year revisit and reiterate the importance of academic freedom. Over time, I hope that we will be able to build stronger European safeguards to protect academic freedom, and there are various ways one can do that, of course. System of ombudsmen for academic freedom, for example, and coupled with stronger legal also safeguards, which I know is discussed in the Parliament in the EU. I also know that Dutch universities have written statements of academic freedom, and we are working on that in Sweden as well. It could be a good start also to systematically monitor academic freedom in EU member states. We need data, we need transparency, and academic freedom, of course, doesn't collapse overnight. It's more an erosion, as I see, through small compromises. And of course, the funding weapon, so to speak, is of course used. We see that in the US, so underfunding is a part of this. It can be also pressure on the leadership, academic leadership, and even attacks on the legitimacy of certain fields and so on, threats and so on to individual researchers. So I think we must recognize these early warning signs and identify even more subtle patterns. Another strategy is to seek to safeguard key EU instruments to ensure, let's say, the beacons or bastions or anchors of academic freedom. I think ERC plays a very, very important role and has been also enormously successful. As an example, for what is it now, a bit over a decade, 14 ERC grantees have been awarded the Nobel Prize, for example. It enjoys, ERC, a great deal of independence. It is run by a scientific board, and I think we do all, and Guild works hard in close collaboration with the ERC President Maria Leptin to keep it this way. So finally, I think we need to reinforce cooperation between European universities, take steps towards a well-functioning European research area and the European education area, where academic freedom is protected. Here I would like to mention, and that's maybe also something for the discussion, the role of European university alliances. I think that's a very interesting instrument being developed since 5 years now, I think. We follow that closely, and the Guild and Uppsala is part of one of the European university called Enlight. Altogether, there are more than 60 university alliances in Europe, and that means about 600 European universities in collaboration. I think it's mainly focused on student mobility, but it also creates, of course, a European platform, I think, for collaboration. I do see potential also to drive the European universities to a more integrated European system for education and research. So a vision here could, of course, be, if we talk about student mobility, that as a student, I start to study in my hometown, for example, Uppsala. I find some interesting courses or semester in, let's say, Paris, and then I take my exam from Milan or something like that. So you have a complete flexibility through Europe. I think that's far away and a lot of work to do with, but I do feel it's an interesting vision to have. Of course, European university could difficulties is that they are the university teaching system is, of course, very regulated, and that's regulated by the member states. So it's difficult for EU to really make changes here. But I do think there are interesting steps taken here. I do think in this context also we need, as academicians, to be taking an active part in the debate and also at the national level. So also, of course, it's not only about EU and within EU. I think it's maybe a bit naive in the context to say where the world is becoming more and more characterized by great power struggle and strong competition. And I do agree that we need to enhance security and working hard to do so. But I think academics fundamentally are global, and we need to keep academic contacts between teachers and researchers. So we need to have as open as possible for all global collaboration. And no single country or continent can solve some of the big issues we have, climate change, pandemics, digital governance. I know also the more on the industrial side. We have the Chip Act discussion, and maybe I know from our president, Professor Martins, that there is a discussion about an Energy Act. So there are much more things to do here. I think I will stop here. It's a little bit of a summary of my own experiences so far, and a summary of what I have seen and think about. And as I said, it's interesting to come from a very research intense activities for my own research to try to understand this more political side of research. So I'm also now very curious and interested to hear your thoughts and your questions, of course. So thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Professor Hagfeldt, for sharing your views on how Europe can be competitive in the coming years and decades. Thank you very much. And I think the talk or this conversation is now open for the question. If anybody has a question, maybe they can proceed and I will follow afterward. Or you can also write in the chat box. Professor Martin, do you want to add something here? And you have something about energy you were telling, maybe you can tell for a broader audience.
Yes, I would like, thank you very much. Outstanding talk. My point is that we are trying to converge for other energy sources. As you said at the beginning, AI is a tool that we need for giving quantum jumps as far as research is concerned. But when you go looking for this, we have two problems. The first problem is that we need a lot of energy for the supercomputer. So we are engaged on this, and there are a lot of people looking for nuclear energy for this, while they don't see that we should try to bet on new materials or new devices with ultra low power consuming. This is one question. The second one is when you speak about energy storage, one of the things that is the dream of the people is to have electrical airplane. And with today's technology, it's impossible because the weight of the batteries will not make the plane to go further. So what is your strategy concerning us? We have from ideas to the applications, and how this could impact on the new avenues that we need to open in Europe.
Yeah, this is, first of all, I agree completely with you. I mean, the need for energy and electricity in particular is huge. And of course, with the solar cells, for example, and wind becoming quite cheap, the question comes to the storage problem. It's an interesting discussion to take, I think, because I also see, I mean, we see with if we take, for example, the battery, at least in Sweden, it was a lot of efforts to bring up a big battery company called Northvolt, and that collapsed more or less because of, well, there were various issues, but one was the production yield, as I understand it. And of course, we are lagging behind China here, I think. So that comes to the competitiveness. What should we do in Europe? How self-sustained should we be in production of energy technologies and both production and storage, I think. So EU must, I think, step up to do something. So this, I don't know really, I must say, about this initiative for a more focused energy act, but I do think it would be very timely to do that. As a university, I think what we can do in the big picture, where the industry is huge in many topics like solar and batteries and so on, which I know best from myself, is of course also to promote basic research in terms of the next or even next generation of technologies to drive the more fundamental things where we can perhaps find new innovation in Europe with new technologies And then we need to combine these kind of innovations and so on coming up with a good system to take care of them also in terms of building up startups and industry and scale up industries and so on. So I think this is a very connected thing between basic research to discover new technologies together with a very active innovation system.
So thank you. We have another question from Professor Sidney Rivero. Is it possible to strengthen relationship between GIL and Brazilian university?
Thank you for that question. Good. I can say GILD is very much an EU policy network. So at the core, the GILD office is in Brussels, and the core of the GILD is really to try to influence and the EU system. But I mentioned also the GILD initiative with Aruba, and that's a little bit of a new thing for GILD. And I think that came up as the strategic importance of collaborating with Africa, and I must say it's a very interesting and promising way of collaborating. We have not discussed, let's say, other partners globally, let's say. So it has not been on the agenda, is the answer, but it could be interesting. It's something to explore, perhaps.
Thank you. Maybe Professor Sidney can be in contact with GILD.
Sure. Thank you very much.
If we have a Professor Pombero, do we have a curious?
I have a question, very nice talk. I wanted to ask you, the new technologies are quite interesting. To what extent they are carbon neutral? Because at the end, dear colleague, we have to protect our ecosystem. In terms of carbon neutrality, in terms of negative carbon footprint, how we look at this point, these new technologies. Would you please elaborate?
Yeah, now I'm out of my expertise, I must say, so I think anyone's input here is good to take. But I can say my take on it. Of course, we compare different technologies. Now I go back to my own field, which is solar cells. The new emerging ones, in particular, then the most interesting one, I think, is the perovskites, do have a significantly less carbon footprint in production than the conventional silicon ones, and that's basically due to significantly less materials and easier, let's say, production processing. So there are, I mean, that's a point of also with new technologies to look into that. Another completely other level of thought is, of course, that with more and more renewable energy being used, and with renewable energy like wind and solar, there is, of course, a lot of fluctuations in that. But of course, to use that electricity for production, then we have a non-carbon based production of electricity as well. So I see that as more and more renewable comes in, it will be also there less and less carbon footprint as far as I can understand.
So thank you. Please go ahead, unmute yourself. If you have any question, please ask directly. Okay, so, Professor Hagfeldt and dear Anders, this brings me to my question, because we know that we also from the same field, perovskite solar cells. So there was a view in the Commission a few years back that Europe doesn't want production, and we shifted all the production to rely on China. And Europe was more interested in generating IP. Now we want to do it back, because we know that selling IP or just outsourcing the IP or copyrights is not a good option. So how do you see because it will not production, or it will not take 1 year or 2 years, building a production, cheap production, which is we are losing, and like you said, Northvolt is because we are not competitive like solar cells. The production cost in China is very cheap because we have closed, Germany and other countries have closed all their production and they outsource to China, and now we want to bring them back. Does GIL has also some protocol or some type of a strategy to tackle this or suggest to the Commission?
No, not specifically on this question. Guild is, I would say the Guild is more, as I say, a policy instrument to drive, let's say, the broader aspect of, so one focus, as I said, for Guild is to really fight for ERC money, for example, and fight for independent, self-standing, ring-fenced, so to speak, budget for the framework program. It's more of these questions, mostly research, and Guild follows a bit more on the educational side, but it's such things. When it comes to industrial development and your question, I think in the more general level, then what the Guild is driving and what I see is also that when you see what happens with silicon solar cell and it's extremely cheap, as you say, I don't know really, but I see it very low probability that one could build up some industry in Europe to compete with China in the same game, so to speak. So we need to make game changers. I think at least that's what that is our role as academics. I think to try to change the game, so to speak, with new technologies or new ideas or whatever. But so I would, if I would go back to research, for example, and I would say let's try to make the perovskite solar cell without silicon, but make them more efficient in terms of multi-junction devices and solve some of the issues there, which are more our research questions to solve. And then we can try to make sure that EU also supports early stage industrial development.
Yes, manufacturing.
And even more important, I think, to make sure that it supports after the initial startup phase, because that's even more challenging, I think, when you need much more money. So we can make sure that we can produce technologies or pharmaceuticals or other things within EU as well. Then, of course, when it comes to production, I also think that one big role is, of course, AI and robotics. More and more of let's say traditional manufacturing plants and so on, cars or whatever we have is produced by robotics. So that will also be changing things in terms of industrial development, and maybe there in that kind of trend there are also new ideas which one can think about. And so I think EU should be very much forward-looking in this respect.
Yeah, thank you very much. So yeah, manufacturing is now being discussed a lot in your commission. Before it was, they were happy to outsource in China, but now they want to bring it back. So if we have any further questions and queries and suggestions for our speaker.
Well, may I?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you very much for this very interesting talk and for bringing such relevant points to us. Well, there's one issue that I would like to ask, because I'm not familiar with the Guild network, but I really enjoyed listening to what are some of the aims and the activities of this network. Yeah. But is it somehow connected to academies of sciences in Europe and outside Europe? Because I see that there are some common interests in the missions of these institutions. For instance, to provide independent scientific knowledge to policymakers, and well, cooperation, of course, is another keyword, academic freedom, and so on. And so I can see here that some common interests. And of course, in order to increase the efficiency and sustainability, just to use a normal, a fashionable word, yeah, probably it would be advantages also to try to get connections with European academies like EurASc, yeah, but also in some particular points, also with some national academies in Europe and outside Europe. And of course, we should, I think, in my opinion, you should think not only on Western Europe, but also on Eastern Europe, on scientific matters, because you mentioned and very well problems with the current problems with the United States, yeah, concerning science, and that we should make an effort, in fact, to help our American colleagues. But of course, we know very well that there are also very serious problems with Eastern Europe, and very complicated geographic problems and political problems. But many of our colleagues who are there really, they have no responsibility at all on that. And I think we should not close the door, because otherwise they will be alone, left alone, and completely unprotected. They are already, but then they will become completely out of action, let us say, out of help. And so these are just some thoughts that came to my mind when I was listening to your very interesting talk. And so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think that was an excellent comment. We have not actively, if I now take the Guild, so much actively worked on academies. So I was very happy to get invitation from you, EurASc, to talk about the Guild. I felt that was a connection which we do have, and I mean I think we share very much the same views on things, and I do think we need a joint voice in the questions, because we are, as we see, there are many threats and many things happening. So we have to stand up together, I think, and where we agree. And also I have, for example, I'm a member of the Swedish academies here, both the Royal and the Engineering and so on. But I have not myself connected the Guild with the national academies. But we of course discuss the same thing. So I think that was a very interesting idea, to also connect academies together with the network, and at least get contacts. So I will for sure bring my meetings with you forward to. We have a board meeting in the Guild next week, so I will mention this interesting meeting here. On the East Europe side, I also, of course, completely agree. We have to keep, as I said, the academic contacts and so on open, although there may be governments and other activities which are perhaps not so academically friendly, but that's, I think, is key important. I think it's actually a main motivation, I feel, as a rector or president of a university to work on these issues globally, let's say. So I think that's very important. So thanks for bringing that in as well.
Okay, so thank you very much. If we don't have any further question, I think I would like to thank everyone, especially to our speaker. And I think I am being seconded from our president. This is an outstanding talk. He just wrote in the comment in chat box. So thank you very much. And also, if you need it, I think the Academy is very happy to have a signature endorsement. We can collect all the signature, or Sara can for your Guild, because we also want to stand for the science. We need more research intensive new commissions to do. So if you need it, we are always there. We can have a signature campaign, and most of the members can endorse it.
Good, great.
So Professor Hagfeldt and dear Anders, thank you very much for taking this time. And I'm very glad personally also to see you after a long time. So
thank you very much. Very nice to see you.